Okay. Okay, good morning. So we're going to tackle this chapter 12 again. This is a little bit of a philosophical, deeper chapter. And we're going through the differences between Yesh, meayin and Iyar. Two ways that things can be created. And in the booklet, which is booklet number 2, it's page, we'll use page 90. Did I say 90? Where it has that chart.
75.
What? 95?
75.
75. Sorry. Where it has the chart. Yeah, page 75. So let's try this again. Try to make it simple. Let's first explain it. What?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So with not Yesh meayin, but the other one.
Iyar.
Yeah. So this one is within the world. It kind of makes sense when you say that process or that it's because we're already in the world of what a fear
Right.
and that's action. So I mean,
So in our world, what we experience, everything is Iyar.
Yeah.
So I want to explain a little bit this Iyar part. Remember I said yesterday that there's a section in Tanya which talks about Yesh meayin, and that's in volume 2, Shari V'Amuna. And in that section of Tanya, the Alter Rebbe explains this idea that Hashem recreates the world every second. And the reason for this is because, how come we don't find this by humans, that when we create something, you don't have to create it every second. So if a person creates a picture by drawing the picture, creates a building, creates a house, creates a chair, takes a piece of metal and creates a menorah, he doesn't have to constantly make sure that it stays that way. He does what he does, then he can remove himself, and this continues and lasts forever. So why are we saying about Hashem, who's superior to everything else in creation, that when he creates, he has to constantly be there and sustain the creation, and without that, it couldn't exist. That should be a sign of weakness, not a sign of strength. So someone would tell you, have a very good contractor, and he can build you a beautiful bookcase, but the only problem is he has to be standing there for the rest of his life to hold it, make sure it doesn't fall apart. You probably wouldn't hire him. Then you need another guy holding the cabinets in the sink. You need another person holding the building. You'd be surrounded by a whole team. So the Alter Rebbe says the difference is because all human creations are Iyar. And there's another word for it, which is easier maybe to follow. It's Yesh Yesh, something from something. And not Yesh meayin, something from nothing. So let's understand that for a moment, and then we'll be able to go back to our Mamar. In a sense, when people create things, it's also something from nothing. If I have a piece of metal and I create a menorah, the menorah is Yesh meayin. There was no menorah here before. I can say the metal was here before, but this menorah was not here before. And therefore, if the principle of the matter is that when you create something new, if it's totally new, then you constantly have to be there to support it, otherwise it will fall apart. Then how come you don't have to do something like that when you take a piece of metal which is raw and you create a menorah out of it?
so you kind of need Yesh Yesh. Yesh meayin is like the ultimate thing that's supporting that.
Right. Yesh meayin needs constant support because it's new. I mean, the mashal for that, which comes to my mind, it's not exactly what it says in Shari Chamuna, but I'll use the mashal, something which we can relate to, is that when you teach a child how to walk, so you teach him how to walk and he falls down, you teach him how to walk and he falls down, but after keep doing it over and over and over and over, eventually he starts walking by himself. What if you would take a doll and walk with it for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 100 hours, 1,000 hours, walk with it for 100 consecutive years, not even stop for a second. People will exchange you, and this doll is walking for 100 years. What happens when you let go? In an instant, it falls on the floor. How could it be that all this walking didn't do something? What?
It's got no life.
It's got no life. That means that the fact that this doll could walk is new, is like a new thing, and it's only exclusively because of me. So the moment I remove my hand or anybody removes their hand, the doll falls down. When you teach a child how to walk, even though I'm teaching him how to walk, but really I'm not really providing that ability to the child. The child has that ability on his own, has the potential. What I'm doing is helping him develop his own potential. So this is the principle, that when you are creating something new that did not exist at all before, no potential, then it can't exist on its own. The moment you let go, it'll fall apart. But all human creations are not that way. They're all taking something which already had potential before, and all I'm doing, in a sense, is just developing it, doing something that's a trigger that allows that potential to come out. So just like it is with the child, the same as with a piece of metal. When I take a piece of metal and I form it into a menorah, it's not, even the menorah part is not new. The metal already had the potential that it could be formed in any form or shape, including a menorah or a kiddush cup or a fork or a spoon or whatever it may be. So when I develop it into this form and shape, even the form and the shape is not totally new. The potential was there. I'm just developing the potential. If I take wood and I build a house, I'm developing the potential. If a teacher is teaching a student, the child has a brain of his own. I'm developing the potential. So generally speaking, all the situations which we know where one thing creates another, it's always the same thing. I'm taking something which had the potential. I have ink, and this ink has the potential to be formed into any form or shape. It could be words, it could be a landscape, it could be a mountain, it could be clouds, and I develop it to look the way I want it to look. But it's not yesh meayin. So once I finish doing my job, I could remove my hands and it continues to exist on its own. So the pure definition of yesh meayin is something that comes from a source, but it did not exist within the source, not even potential. So it's totally and exclusively owes its existence to the source exclusively, and therefore the source has to be there all the time. This is what it says in Tanya in Shari Chilomuna. This is clear? Okay, so now based on that, so this is the first thing on the chart, page 75. The Yesh does not exist in the source at all. And in the case of Iyar v'Olol, the effect existed in some form or shape. The source for it was already there in the source. I mean, another mashal that's given in Chassidus is a hot coal. You have a hot coal, you have a coal, but you don't have a flame. If I blow on it, a flame will appear. Is this flame yesh meayin? Because it wasn't here before. The answer is no, because there was already heat in the coal. And when I blow on it, I'm just allowing whatever was there potentially to come out of the open. And what if I take a flintstone, a little rock, and I strike it with a piece of metal and sparks come out? Are these sparks yesh meayin? There's no spark before. It's not even like a hot coal. There was no flame. There was no heat. There was nothing. There's no fire inside. If you touch the stone, you don't burn yourself. If you pour water on it or you soak it in water, it won't become extinguished. That means, but it's still not yesh meayin because the potential for a spark was already in this rock. If I'll take the same piece of metal and strike rubber, sparks won't come out of it. If I'll strike water, sparks won't come out of it. When I strike this rock, sparks will come out. That means that the potential for the spark already existed in this. So this is point number one in the difference. Point number two, B. Therefore, when the Yesh is created, it is new in an absolute way. We really can call it Yesh meayin. But by the way, this answers another question. when this world is created, Yesh meayin, who created it? And that's how we refer to Hashem, as nothing. Yesh meayin, it comes from nothing.
Creation. There
What?
was no creation.
There was nothing before.
Nothing doesn't mean that nothing. There was nothing created.
Right. It comes from a place where nothing was there before. Not only it didn't exist, even its potential didn't exist. So you, Chavi, you asked a question yesterday, but the potential was within Hashem before. So the answer is it wasn't Hashem, but not in the way that we consider it potential. I'll tell you what I mean. Let's say we said that when you blow on a hot coal, the flame comes out. Could I blow on a hot coal that a cookie would come out? No, flame. Not only it's a flame, but the flame will have certain characteristics of a flame, and all these sort of characteristics and what defines it was already there in the hot coal. I can't blow on the coal and have intention that something very different should come out. It won't work. In other words, the flame is already formed in some way. Certain characteristics of this flame is already existing inside, the rules of it already existing inside the hot coal. And even a spark, when you strike the rock and a spark comes out, there's something in the rock which is potential for a spark, and you can't strike the rock and think or say, okay, the spark that comes out should be like bubblegum. It's not going to work. It's a spark, which means the way it's going to be and the rules that it's going to have, which is that it's fire and everything else, it's already all set. It's all programmed before you even do anything. If I were to say that about Hashem, that Hashem has the potential to create trees and humans and animals, and there's something in Hashem where that potential already exists. That would chas v'shalom mean that Hashem is formed or shaped, that he's finite. So in Hashem, there's nothing there. There's actually nothing inside him that has anything in common with what comes created. The fact that Hashem creates a tree, a person, or even in the spiritual world, whatever is Yesh meayin, it only begins to have its form and shape and characteristics once Hashem chose to create it that way. But in Hashem, there's nothing there that leads to this. This is the basis for a very famous quote in Chassidus, comes from Kabbalah, that even though the whole world is based on the 10 spheres, but if Hashem wanted to, he could have created the world with 10 different spheres that totally are different than what we know. In fact, Hashem could have created the world with 1,000 spheres. In other words, when Hashem chose to create the world with fire, air, earth, and water, it's not that in him there's something fiery, earthy, watery, and airy, because that means he would be finite. So in him, there's no connection to anything. He could have created any form, any shape, any kind of energy that's totally different from anything we can even imagine. And the only reason that it is the way it is because he chose to make it that way. But there's nothing in him that has any leaning to what comes out later. And that's not what we mean when we say potential. When we say potential, it means that inside it's already, in the seed, there's already certain things that if you look with a microscope, certain things that'll lead to an apple tree and a pear tree and an orange, because inside it's already formed in a way that it's going to lead to these results. So the potential for fire is found in the coal, and the potential for water is found in other things that are a source for water, and the same with everything else. So when we say that the potential already exists, it means it already existed in a certain finite, defined way. Within Hashem, it didn't exist at all. There's nothing there that has any relationship, any association, anything in common with what was created. That's why it's called Yesh meayin.
So anything that has potential is a creation, and therefore it's finite.
Right. If it has a potential to produce something specific, that means in its potential state, it's already specific.
So Yesh did not have a potential.
What?
But it was different.
Yesh meayin, in the source, there was nothing there that had these defined finite description in any way. That's why we call it ayin, nothing. There was nothing there, not actual and not even a potential. Yes, Hashem has the potential to create anything he wants, but there's no connection to what he actually created because that's only by his choice. If I would say there's something in him that is leaning, and that's why he ended up creating fire, water, earth, and air, because there's something in him that relates to these four elements, that means that he himself is defined by the four elements.
So if we're creating something, like you said, for example, like painting or whatever, you're saying in a way it's coming from Yesh meayin as well because it's there, right? Now it's there,
No, not by people, even though it wasn't there before, but the potential was there.
But then the explanation is potential is limited and it's like it's.
That's right. That means that this picture that I drew potentially already existed in my head, in my mind, in my.
It can't be Yesh meayin.
That's not it. I'm saying it's not Yesh meayin. It's actually Yesh Yesh. It's Iyar v'Olu. When I said what I said, it was about the way Hashem creates the world. We knew there was absolutely no formed, finite, defined potential before.
So, what does it mean in Bereshit then, when Rashi explains that when Hashem created the world, he was created in a way that was like everything was prepared in the kitchen and then he brought it out on specific days? Because if everything was created.
Yeah, but that was created on Sunday. Everything was created on the first day, Rashi says. And then later he brought it out and developed it. But the first creation was already on Sunday. That was the day of Yesh meayin in a sense, more than anything.
Okay.
So let's try to understand C, the third point on this list. The process of creation, in the case of Iyar v'Olu, requires that the Iyar apply itself and reveal itself. This allows the Olul to be produced. But by Yesh meayin, the process of creation requires that the source distance itself, conceals itself from the Yesh.
What page are we on?
Page 75 in this booklet. I'm sorry I'm making you jump from the book to the booklet, from the booklet to the book, but this is the early morning exercise. What we're saying is by Iyar v'Olu, the potential for this product, which is the Olul, the thing that's being created, is inside the source. So what makes it actually come into existence? By revealing the potential, not by concealing the potential. By the source revealing a certain aspect of it is, the more it's revealed, the more it's developed, then you have the result. So yesterday we said one of the examples would be intellect and emotion. Intellect gives birth to emotion. Intellect produces emotion. If I understand how dangerous something is, it develops in the heart the emotion of fear. If I understand how precious something is, how beautiful something is, that develops in my heart a feeling of love. I'm drawn to it and I want this and I like it. So the Iyar is the intellect, and what's the Olul? The emotion. So we said yesterday that the emotion was already included in the Iyar, in the intellect, because with my brain I understand, logic dictates that if this is so dangerous, I should run away from it. So already in the logic, there was already the conclusion of this emotion, that this logic leads to fear, and this logic leads to love, and this logic leads to respect, and this logic leads to admiration, and this logic leads to something else. That means that in the brain, the emotion was already there, and then eventually it develops in the heart. That's fully developed. In fact, in some places in Chassidus, it's compared to childbirth. We say that the intellect are the parents, emotion is like the children. So before the baby is born, the baby is included in the mother. And then the baby comes out as its own independent identity. That's how emotion is also included in the intellect. I understand with my brain that Hashem is infinite, and therefore my brain dictates I should feel awe for Hashem who's so infinite. And once I think about that, it starts affecting the heart, that the heart actually has a sensation of awe. But it's first included in the brain. So in order for the source to create the Ila, to create the Olul, I need that what's in the source should become more and more revealed. And then it creates the Olul. Yesh meayin is the opposite. Yesh meayin means it's coming from a source where this doesn't exist at all. So it means that if the source will be revealed, then this can't exist. The source has to conceal itself, withdraw itself, to allow something which is non-existent to come into existence. So the ayin is totally hidden. That's why we, in this physical world, we're created yesh meayin, we have no sense, no feeling, except unless we study and we learn and we're pointed out. But otherwise, the way people walk around, it's like, where did you come from? What do you mean, where did you come? Everything is just there. The trees, the apples, the people, the animals, the earth, planets, the sun, the moon, it just existed. There's no feeling that it comes from a source because the source is totally hidden.
So only on opposite spectrum.
What?
You have these two extremes.
Well, that's what it's going to bring out. Once you think about it, then you realize even more how amazing Yesh meayin is, that we'll soon see that it exists in a way where it brings together two opposite things, especially when you do number 4 on the list. Yes, Chav.
Then why does Hashem create potential if he's going to do things yesh meayin anyway? He's doing with yesh meayin everything right now. So it's redundant to talk even about potential. Why are we even talking about potential?
Very good question. In fact, we learned a Mamar in the beginning of the year called Micha Mocha by the Rabbi Majeski, and he asked that question, and he goes into the answer to the question. But I'm going to wait a little bit because it's going to interrupt our flow of, even if there is a flow of understanding, but whatever there is.
There's a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. And this will take us away somewhere else.
I'm thinking, and it's like everything is just nothing. It's so what? Like, it's just nothing.
Let's just say Hashem, and that's it.
Just like challenge.
Spiritual challenge. Now you know what challenge is all about. So, if we would do it this way, let's say this is the source. Let's say this is the source. This is the Ila, the source. And there's something in here. This is the potential. And this is the Olul. This is the Olul. This is the product. So in order for this to become this potential has to be revealed or concealed?
Revealed.
Right. In fact, the more it's revealed, we'll say it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and eventually it becomes this. But when you're dealing with Yesh meayin, why do I give him so much? Sorry. This is the source. So this is ayin. And this is the yesh. The yesh meayin means that this doesn't exist. This yesh does not exist in the source whatsoever. Can't exist in the source. It's not even, it's so spiritual, it's so abstract, it's so infinite. It doesn't even a potential doesn't exist in here. The more this is revealed, there's less room for this to exist. So the way the ayin creates the yesh is the opposite, by withdrawing itself. Because if it opens up, then the yesh can't exist.
Mind-boggling.
Yeah, so the mind-boggling part is, which one of the two is more dependent on the source, this or that?
That's
you
a
know.
really good question, Rabbi Majeski.
So we just finished saying that the Yesh needs the ayin every second,
Yeah.
if it's a new existence. So it's very interesting. This has to constantly, every second, be involved with creating the Yesh. Without it, even a second, it'll discontinue to exist. On the other hand, it's totally hidden from it. Over here is the opposite. This reveals itself to the Ol, but the Ol could continue to exist independently. And that's what he's saying is what he called wondrous, something really amazing about Yesh meayin, that it embodies two opposite things. On one hand, it's totally connected to the Yesh in a way that the Yesh can't exist one split second without the source. On the other hand, it's totally concealed from the Yesh and hidden, that it doesn't, the Yesh is totally unaware of its source, because if it would be aware, it couldn't exist. It's too overwhelming. So if a person would meditate on all this and think about this, what he should come to as a conclusion is how awesome Hashem is, how inconceivable Hashem's creation is, how humans can't even begin to understand this amazing process of creation of Yesh meayin. And then this would bring a person to feel great joy that I have the schus and I have the merit that when I say Amen and I say Ashrei and I put on tefillin and I light Shabbos candles or whatever it is that I do, I'm connecting to this infinite, awesome Hashem who created the world, Yesh meayin. That's why he's davening with simcha. That's what he's going to explain here. And if you don't understand it, then you're so besimcha because this is so amazing. I don't even begin to understand it. So you should even be more besimcha. So there is an advantage in not understanding. But we should understand what we don't understand.
Like from reveal or intent to soul limited and you're trying to.
What?
With your diagram above, I'm thinking like when you put Yesh, Iyar, kind of underneath Yesh, and then
Right.
kind of expand it, like expand it again down to. It's like you're getting this limited power, you hiding it, and then you kind of
Right. So
expanding it again.
that's the question. How is it from withdrawing that it becomes created? Withdrawing is pulling away. Created is the opposite. And that's what Yesh meayin is, two opposites. That's why we have, it's inconceivable to humans how this process of creation takes place.
So wait, is it going on simultaneously, both methods?
Yeah. It's going on simultaneously because, I mean, I don't want to get lost there, but we know that that's what it means in Chassidus, that there are two levels of godliness affecting the world at the same time. One is Soviv Kolalman, and one is Mamar Kolalman. So Soviv Kolalman is the source of creating Yesh meayin. Like, for example, you have a flower. So the mere existence of the flower, Yesh meayin, that's happening, that's from Soviv Kolalman. But the color of the flower, the odor of the flower, the properties of this flower has, all the details, that's the part that evolves Yesh me'yesh. So yes, both are really happening at the same time.
The Iyar will also has like Yesh meayin inside there.
Right. Has to have, because it's also Yesh me'ayin. Yeah. Let's try to do it inside and see how far we can get without disappearing. Okay, V'hinei. Well, on page 90 again, let's start with V'hinei. I'm going to read on the bottom where you have the English and the Hebrew together. V'hinei. Kasher Yedua, it's known that Avodah Yesh Beizek Fani Avodah. There are two approaches, two paths in serving Hashem. One is serving Hashem with simcha. Person davens, and the davening generates joy, very excited. And the second thing is, you only see this in the English because it's not in the Hebrew text, is serving Hashem, and the feeling that is generated is humility. And that's what motivates me to serve Hashem. So first he's going to explain simcha. V'hainu, kishamas kilim is boinen heita b'gdulas Hashem. When a person will meditate and understand properly the greatness of Hashem, and will understand two things. First of all, in general, Oitzem Gdulosei B'inyan Habriya Yesh meayin. The awesome greatness that is seen in the creation of Yesh meayin, just creating something new out of nothing, as is explained in other places, that Levadza is besides the fact, Masha Etzem Inyan Bresh meayin U Inyan Nifla, creating Yesh meayin is something which is absolutely amazing to our minds, because Ein Laha'adam Shum Tzir Al Zeh Klal. Humans have no imagination. There's nothing we can compare it to in our human experience. Like we said yesterday, that even things that are only attributed to Hashem, like Chokhmah, and we can't even compare anything to Chokhmah of Hashem, but there's some sort of common denominator between our Chokhmah and that Chokhmah. If we would say that Chokhmah is infinitely greater than our Chokhmah, so that's infinite and this is finite, but there's some similarity in some way. Chokhmah is Chokhmah, Chesed is Chesed. But there's another point. There's another thing which is absolutely beyond our comprehension, and that is the Yedua. It's known the Bria Yesh meayin Ubebchinas Richu Ka'erich. In the process of creation, Yesh meayin, the distance, the gap between the source, which is the ayin, and the yesh, is a gap which is richu ka'erech, which means it's immeasurable gap. The zeh hefesh bein ila v'olo. This is one of the differences between ila v'olo and yesh meayin. The ila v'olo l'bchinas hashpa b'kiruv. When there's the process of cause and effect, then the hashpa, the influence that comes from the source, from the cause, to the effect is through closeness. Sha'ila mislabish b'ha'olu, the source, which is the ila, has to enclose itself, meaning engage with the olul and come close to it, and that's ha'olul margish asilosei, and the olul feels and senses its source, where it's coming from. So the ila and the olul are in some sort of a common grounds between the two of them. So let's say the teacher and the student. For the teacher to teach the student is by the teacher applying themselves to the student, engaging with the student. In fact, the teacher has to think about the student and do an assessment of his intellectual capacity. What could he understand? What could he not understand? How could I present it to him? What would be the best way of explaining it to this particular student? So that means the source is actually coming close to the student and applying himself to the student. He brings himself down to the level of the student that he can understand. And the student, of course, is aware that this is the teacher that's giving him this hashpah. And by the way, the same is with intellect and emotion. That when a person thinks about a certain thought process and that produces an emotion, then the more the thought process is applicable, the more it'll produce emotion. Sometimes you can learn something and it doesn't produce any emotion. And you know the reason why? Because I think about it in such an abstract way that it doesn't relate to anything emotional, and therefore nothing will happen emotional. And I think we once explained this. I said a moment ago that the intellect is the parents and the emotion are the children. Let's use that analogy. If the intellect are the parents, which is the father and which is the mother between Chokhmah and Bina?
Chokhmah is the father, Bina is the mother.
Chokhmah is the father, Bina is the mother. And let's take this analogy further. Of course, the creation of this child comes from father and the mother, but who's the one that she carries the child and delivers the child, and the process of birth is from her, is the mother, not the father. In fact, after the father's initial input, the child could be born without him at all. Now everything is from the mother. Spiritually, it's the same thing. That the midos, the emotions, are developed mainly through Bina, not through Chokhmah. What's the reason for that? Because Chokhmah means understanding things on a deep, abstract level. When you understand things on an abstract level, they won't produce emotion because it's removed from reality. It's removed from practical things. In order for the intellect to develop emotion, have to connect it to something practical. So someone is going to think about Hashem, how he's infinite, and what infinite means on the infinite levels of infinity it's not going to do anything to me. But if I think about Hashem and how it relates to me serving Him, regarding Hashgacha Pratis, how He's involved in my life, things that connect to me, that will produce emotion. So the way intellect produces emotion is by the intellect applying itself to the heart and sort of engaging the emotion, and then the emotion will be generated through the intellect. So it comes close. The source has to come close.
So what about doubt?
That is just a bridge. That is the bridge that allows the intellect to connect to the emotion. But what generates the emotion is the understanding of the concept.
So Bina is the one connected.
So the one that's more connected to emotion is Bina, even though Bina is lower than Chokhmah, but Dafka, because it's lower, it's not so abstract, so it's more practical and it's related more to the practical things.
Is that why women are more emotional than men?
I'm not going there. Leave it up to the Jewish home class. Let those teachers deal with it.
I'll ask you, Fernanda.
Okay.
I'll get her in trouble.
Mashenkim is Havas Yesh meayin, but different by Yesh meayin. In the case of Yesh meayin, the creation is in a way that it's incomparable. There's no connection. There's no common grounds. The Yesh and the ayin are the ayin. The Yesh does not exist in the world of the ayin at all. So the only way the Hashpah can come is the B'chinas Richuk. Shahabayra, the creator, conceals himself and withdraws himself and hides himself from the creation. And he doesn't apply himself, he doesn't reveal himself. So as it get created, that's the part that makes it so shocking and hard to understand. And that shows us how Hashem is infinite and his creation and process of creation is beyond our comprehension. Okay, Rabbi Hanok is here.
Wait, Rabbi, does he talk about that though,
About what?
in the Mamar? How?
No.
What?
He talks about how we don't understand it, and that's why we're in absolute awe and besimcha when we realize how infinite Hashem is, and therefore we could connect to Him. Okay.